Good afternoon. I am excited to introduce to you Dr. Christine Holt. Dr. Christine Holt currently serves as Chief of Staff of the University of Missouri System. Dr. Holt has previously served as Associate Provost of the University of Missouri at Columbia, Dean of Academic Administration at Northern Virginia Community College, where she has also served as Interim Dean of Learning and Technology Resources, Interim Dean of Students, and Interim Provost. She also has served as the Executive Director at Catawba Valley Community College, Career Development Coordinator at Cuyahoga Valley Career Center, Human Resource Development Coordinator at Montgomery Community College, Site Coordinator and Workplace Literacy Instructor at Randolph Community College, and Workplace Literacy Instructor at Central Carolina Community College, and an attorney at law. In January of 2021 at the University of Missouri at St. Louis, Dr. Holt successfully defended her dissertation, and doctorate in business administration will be conferred later this spring. She also holds a Juris Doctorate from Cleveland State University, a Master of Arts in Adult Education from East Carolina University, and a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration from Capital University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Christine Holt.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. Well, let me first say congratulations to you. You've made it to the end of this process. And I know it has been a process, and I'm very thankful to have made it this far in the process as well. I want to say first that your hospitality just has been stellar from the beginning of the process until now. Second, I want to say that it has been a great learning experience for me because this is the way to conduct this kind of search, to make sure that you have all the stakeholders involved and engaged in the process, and then to have an opportunity to meet and greet with the candidates. And certainly I know it's been difficult in this COVID environment, so I commend you for getting to this stage in the process. Also, I have to say that it has been a very fruitful and productive day. There have been a lot of meetings, but certainly it has allowed me to have a better understanding of what makes this place so unique. So thank you for your endurance in this entire process. I should also tell you that oftentimes when my mother would come to events like this, she would tell me before I would get up, she would say, "Now listen, if I start coughing uncontrollably, there's a reason. That's a cue to you. That means you've been up too long. You need to sit down." So my goal for today is that I don't hear audience members coughing uncontrollably, and certainly not from the remote audience, but I do want to make sure that we have ample time to cover a few things today. So with that said, I will go ahead and get started. So the thing that you should note here is this. What I'm hoping to cover during our session today is three main topics. One, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself and my candidacy. We'll cover just briefly because you're in the area so you understand the higher education landscape. And I think that will be good for us because that will lead us to the topic of the innovative vision for UAHT. So let's go ahead and get started. So who am I? Let me tell you a little bit more about myself. And the first thing that I want to tell you is, and I want to say this right up front, why am I interested in this role? And since I put together this slide, I have a fourth one that I just talked about a little earlier. But first and foremost is my strong commitment to the mission and purpose of the work that you do every day in the community college world. You do a great job of really connecting our students to workplace employment and workplace skills. You do a great job of connecting those students who are planning to go on to four-year institutions to prepare them to do well here and then when they transfer. And then you do well of connecting with the community. So I am wholeheartedly passionate about the mission. I certainly understand the transformative power of higher education, and I will look forward as your chancellor to communicate that to our many stakeholders. Second is your reputation at UAHT. I have really been impressed by what I have seen in my review of UAHT, the work that I've seen online, on your website, on your YouTube videos, and then just in talking with all of you in the campus today on tour, just highlights for me how truly innovative you are. And certainly, you know, with the new solar lab that you have coming on soon, and also the work, the bladesmithing program is a niche program that you have. And then lastly, and there's so many others that I could talk about, but the other thing that I want to note is the work of George Smith. And this really speaks to the fact that we are nimble in the community college world to be able to take what we do, go out, talk with entrepreneurs, realizing this last year has been difficult for all of us, but to have the foresight to develop a program or a course around entrepreneurship to make sure that we're listening and hearing what the needs are, and then planning a course so that we can address the needs of the business community and help prepare our students for those roles. And then you have other really unique opportunities. I like the fact that you're working with those students who may not have done well academically, and for the community college students that we serve, we're often the second chance and in many cases the last chance that they have to be successful. So your ReRail program shows that you understand that and you're committed to students. So that talks about your reputation of being innovative. And then lastly, when I look at my work, my education, my preparation, I really think the last 25 years or 30 years almost now of my career has prepared me for this next role, the role as Chancellor of UAHT. I understand the depth and breadth of the academic enterprise. That's academic affairs, student affairs, and operations. I've worked in a multitude of sectors, as you heard about my bio, and it really helps me to help faculty, our staff, and students understand that depth and breadth and what that means to our stakeholders, and to provide a compelling proposition, value proposition of the work that we do. So again, you're doing stellar work, and I can help contribute and continue the work that you've already established. Now, who am I? Just so that you're aware, I am a first-generation college student. I am an only child born to parents who grew up in the South. My dad was the third oldest of 10 children. He left his hometown in his late teens. He migrated north, spent some time with his sister so that he would find employment as a short order cook to be able to take care of himself and send money back to take care and support his family. My father knew my mother at a very young age. He actually went back to the hometown that they grew up in, and actually after 10 years he went back, married her, and then they both migrated north to Cleveland, Ohio. And I tell you this story because my mother was a high school graduate, my father was not. And I have to tell you, my father was a math whiz. Computations he could do in his head. And what I often wonder, I try to imagine if my father had grown up in a different time period, what would life have been like for him? If he had a local community college that could have helped him earn a GED and then get him on a track where he could earn perhaps an associate's degree, I am convinced that my father could have been an actuary, a financial planner, accountant, if he had had that opportunity. And the good thing is our students, they do have that opportunity so that they can realize these opportunities and realize their dreams. The other thing that I can tell you is that I've been a trailblazer for most of my life. I had an opportunity in high school to attend a very unique high school. It was called the Law and Public Service Magnet High School. And parenthetically, I should tell you, I was not interested in attending Law and Public Service Magnet High School, at least not at first. I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be a thespian. I wanted to be the next great Cicely Tyson. Well, that didn't work out. I didn't get in, or at least I was on the waiting list for our School of Arts. But what I didn't know is that there was this new opportunity, the Law and Public Service Magnet High School, and my 8th grade teacher, who saw something in me, 8th grade English teacher, talked with my mother and convinced her to apply, put in an application for me, and I was actually accepted into the Law and Public Service Magnet High School. And the reason that this is important is because it sparked my interest in law and public service. One of my favorite quotes is actually attributed to Marion Wright Edelman, and it says this: "Service is the rent that we all should pay for living." Also, some variation of that is attributed to Muhammad Ali. But what that says to me is law, public service, and I've had an opportunity to work in both areas, is something that's near and dear to me, and I know my passion, I know my vocation, I know my calling. So I'm very thankful that my teacher was a lot wiser and my mother was a lot wiser than I was certainly at that period in my life. Now, from high school, I went on and had an opportunity to attend a small Lutheran liberal arts college. And while there, after graduation, I actually took a job in a bank. And my position, or my office, was located adjacent to human resources and talent development. And the reason that that is important is because I thought at that point, what a really unique opportunity, a phenomenal opportunity one would have to work in talent development. Because you're selecting the talent for future generations, or to make sure the survivability, or ensure the survivability of an organization. So I thought, well, this is a really unique opportunity. From that, I decided to go back to graduate school. And I was planning to go into corporate organizational and development and training, talent development, but for a capstone course that I took in the last semester of my studies, and I had an opportunity to do my internship at a community college. And it was there where I found my passion. I had an opportunity to work with the college president, and he shared with me the beauty of a community college. For so many students, it's the only opportunity or the last opportunity that they have to earn a college degree and to find marketable skills and a living wage. So I thought, well, that's a really unique opportunity, one that I had not thought of before. And after that experience and upon graduation, that's when I first entered into the world of higher education as a workplace literacy instructor, and it was on the workforce development arm. And the really unique opportunity that existed there was, even though I worked for Randolph Community College, my employment was at a local business. It was Burlington Industries. It was 4 colleges that came together and 2 workplace sites. And I worked at Burlington Industries, and part of my work there was to do an assessment of the needs of the employees, particularly at frontline level positions, build the curriculum, and then to teach the students. So that, again, that just sparked my interest from that internship to my first position in higher education. And I won't go through every single position here, but I will tell you that, as I said, since my high school days, I've always had a passion for legal affairs and political matters, so I shifted gears and I attended law school. And I was a non-traditional student at this point. Early on, I was a traditional student, non-traditional student, which allowed me to understand some of the needs, which allows me to understand some of the needs of our students. Being older, I was married at that point, had financial obligations, but I was determined that I was going to do this. So I went to law school at night. When I first started, I had a part-time position that moved into a full-time position. I don't know what I was thinking of, Vice President Thomason, to take on a full-time position in law school at the same time, but I did. And as I said, that just imparted upon me and to me the importance of the value of an education, the importance of knowing that you can develop skills that will allow you to get through those challenging times. And often, many of our students are in that same boat where they have many obligations that they're trying to get through and trying to be successful at all of those things. And then I won't go through all of the other positions that you've heard about. I will tell you that I do believe in community service, and I pride myself on being a servant leader. But there are times when you have to make decisions, but I want to make sure that I get all the input from all the stakeholders and then make the best and most informed decision for the institution. I am a sports fan, talked about that earlier, and I love to travel. I love to travel both domestically and internationally. Of course, this past year with COVID, I've also learned that I like to stay home. It's all right to stay home from time to time, but I'll be glad when we can start to travel again. So one of the things that I want to talk about is what prepares me for the role of chancellor. And I went through, and certainly you've heard this in my bio, some of the positions and some of the key things that I've learned that I think would really behoove me to share with you so you can understand why I think I'm prepared to serve in this role of chancellor. So one of the first things that I'll say is chief of staff. Let's start there. People are not really sure what to make of that chief of staff position. I get the question all the time, what does that really mean? What do you do in that role? And some of you have heard me explain it today. The beauty of that role, at least as it's set up in my current environment, is it allows me to work hand in hand on a daily basis with our president. And right now, our president, and this is a permanent change, our president is the president of our system, and he's also the chancellor at one of our campuses. And I get to work hand in hand with him to operationalize our mission, our vision, and strategic priorities. I work with the cabinet in terms of strategizing, making informed decisions, and then enhancing the flow of communication. I also have found it very helpful in working with and being the spokesperson for our president and chancellor with internal and external community groups. I've been able to form alliances, to build partnerships, and all of those things are important and certainly would be important for the role of the chancellor here. In my role as Dean of Academic Administration, I directed multiple activities for the provost, including access and student success. In my portfolio, I had enrollment management, so I understand that. And I developed a reputation as a great problem solver and utility player. So those are all things that you need to be and need to understand, particularly as chancellor. You need to have an understanding of what the issues are, what the problems are, and then to be able to pull together and bring together a team to look at and come up with solutions based on those problems. And then the role that's most akin to this role is I served as interim provost for the Manassas campus when it had about 5,000 students, so a few more students than here. But the beauty of that role is it really was the interim provost was akin to the chancellor in that you served as the chief administrative officer and also had the obligation and responsibility to serve as the chief academic officer as well. And then my legal career. I tell people all the time, every day, I use my legal training. It's everything from looking at contracts to making personnel decisions and grappling with issues to understanding the importance of working with our legislators when we're shaping policy and looking at legislation. So that has come in handy for me in the work that I do and working in the chancellor's office specifically, and I think it would also come in handy as a specific skill set that would be of use in the role of chancellor. Now, I put this in just so that you are aware, that I'm aware of what the competencies and skills would be for someone who serves in the role of chancellor. And what I can tell you here is that there are 9, for those of you who are familiar with the American Association of Community Colleges, there are 9 or so, maybe 11 competencies that chancellors, current sitting chancellors, and they've modified this recently in the 3rd edition in 2018 to include these are the skills that they're looking for in chancellors and presidents. And all of these, if you look at them, they're pretty overwhelming. It almost seems like you're looking for somebody who can walk on water. Well, the beauty of it is the chancellor cannot do this alone. The chancellor has to work with and engage many others, faculty, staff, the cabinet, to make a lot of these things work. And I'll just pick a few in the interest of time. Organizational culture, and that's what I talked about earlier, being devoted to and committed to the mission, the vision, and the priorities, the strategic priorities. Governance, institutional policy, and legislation, that's looking at shared governance, and I can tell you that I am a firm believer and will foster shared governance. It's very important. One of my very first roles as the chief of staff was to work with and modify our policy and codify that in our collective rules in terms of the role of the department chair. And for us, the department chair is such a critical role because it's that role in between the faculty and administration. And we wanted to make sure that we gave it enough oomph that it really had enough oomph to make decisions. And so what that meant was we made the change, and I drafted the change and the amendment in the collective rule, but even more importantly than that was to socialize what does this mean and what will this look like for a campus. So the work that we did, or what I decided to do, was to make sure that we were socializing this and vetting it with our population, our stakeholders, and the stakeholder that was going to be impacted the most, our faculty. So we worked with HR and we worked with academic affairs to socialize this, and we were able to come up with a much better policy because of it. Other things just to note here, fundraising. We know fundraising is a critical role for the chancellor. More and more, we're seeing less state appropriations, and in this case, I know you also have local appropriations as well in your local districts, and we're seeing fewer and fewer of those dollars. So as chancellor, we have to become really creative and about how we can fund our operations. And one of those ways is through fundraising. So I would work with our team, develop a strategy, figure out what our priorities are, and then go out and seek additional funding sources to support our operations. Then when we look at leadership and leadership style, the way to best describe my leadership is I'm collaborative, I'm a servant leader. I want to make sure that I'm equipping our faculty and staff and students with the tools that they need for peak performance, and I'm informed. I want to get data, to make data-informed decisions, and we have to hear from all parties, and making it an opportunity to hear from all parties in many different ways. My philosophy on leadership is best encapsulated by what you see here. Leadership is having a vision, the ingenuity to get others to follow, and at times you have to take a firm stance in order to move the institution forward to achieve excellence. Diversity, I believe diversity should be a part of our fabric. It has to be. It should not be separate or distinct from academic excellence. It's just a part of who we are, and we're committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity means that we want to hear from all voices. And as I mentioned earlier, often we think it means, gender, ethnicity, race. And that's important. We definitely want to make sure we include those populations, but it's also important that we look at a myriad of opportunities to make sure that we're getting diverse perspectives and viewpoints. When we think of equity, it means that we are reducing those barriers, such as harassment, bias, and discrimination. And then inclusion means that we're providing a welcoming environment for everyone to participate. And then the last thing that I'll say here is, as chancellor and as senior leaders, it's important, and as faculty and staff, it's important to review our processes, procedures, and protocols to make sure that we really are an inclusive environment. So the next phase is to talk about the higher education landscape. And I'll just highlight a few points here. And again, this is great for our discussion as we think about how can we become more innovative and creative as it relates to our vision for UAHT. The first thing that I'll tell you is the perception of the value of higher education has eroded. And part of that erosion stems from the fact that the cost of higher education has skyrocketed in the last decade or so. And what that means is, I mentioned earlier that we're getting less and less of the state dollar. So what we're finding is we're shifting that cost in many cases to our students. Now I'm glad to see that you have found really creative ways to keep that cost low, and even for those students who are planning to transfer on to a four-year institution. But across the higher education landscape, that really is a challenge for many institutions. That talks about the affordability, the declining traditional age population of students. And although I know at the community college, the sector of students that we serve has traditionally been not the traditional age students. When we think of college-going students, the 18 to 24-year-old in the four-year sector, it's usually older students who are working and have more responsibilities or additional responsibilities and obligations. Why this is important is because we know that our sister four-year institutions are now finding that for the next foreseeable future, at least the next 10 to 15 years based on projections, particularly in the Midwest and Northeast, we're going to see a declining population of students. So for them, they're becoming a lot more creative and innovative in terms of other market segments that they can look at. And what are those market segments? The populations that we have traditionally served. Certainly diverse students, military students, the older adult learner. So now we might find that they're going to be competing for the same students that we have worked with for so long. I think the thing that we have that four-year institutions don't have is that we do a great job of customizing based on industry needs, and we focus more on career and technical education than our four-year partners. But who knows, they may start to enter into this space at some point. And then the last piece on this slide is we're finding that the pace of change is just astounding. Exponential acceleration of knowledge and learning on demand. We're finding all new ways, as we all saw after COVID, for being able to reach and connect with our students. And that's going to happen more and more. And we know that there are even new players who are entering the market, such as edX and some of those other players. So what do we do to stay on top, show that we have a good value proposition, we're curbing costs, and we're finding new ways to generate revenue? So that leads us into the last topic, and that's the vision for UAHT. How do we become more innovative in what we do? And the way that I broke this up is I decided to look at each of the stakeholder groups. So if we start with students, some of the things that we can do for students and things that you're already doing, certainly here, is new programs. And I mentioned the Solar Lab program that you're working on now, and I know you have others coming down the pike. So those are the kinds of things that we have to stay on the cutting edge. We must be on the forefront of what that means, and we have to do so in a responsible way. We need to assess the market, do a SWOT analysis, see if it's something that we can deliver, high impact, low cost, so that we can deliver in an exceptional way, and we can find students as well as a market demand for the programs that we serve. Stackable credentials, and that's looking at short-term courses, and ideally we want to marry those short-term courses with work keys and other industry credentials, so that way the business community can see, why is this relevant for me and why are you doing this? And it helps students, particularly those students who may say, you know, I'm not sure that I want to commit to a full degree, but let's at least start here. And by the way, if I start here, what are some of the ways that I can market myself a little differently to become more employable? And then hopefully, I know many workplaces are providing opportunities to provide funding for students to continue their education, so that might be another way of getting students more involved and more engaged. So in addition to that, we have new ways of learning. We talked about that, or we'll talk about that a little bit later, and new ways of granting credit. So, for example, one of the things that, and again, this has been a staple in the community college, is prior learning credit. How do we assess skills that, again, traditional students or non-traditional students, they've been in the workforce and they may have had some customized training, they may have had industry training. So how do we look at what they've had, assess that, and then to be able to give them credit for those learning opportunities? And then the last piece, and I'm very convinced that we want to provide an experiential learning piece for all of our students. And what that means is we're looking at ways that we can marry the concepts that they're learning in the classroom with what they're going to be doing in the workforce. And many of whom are already in the workforce, that's great, but we also want to make sure that they are good citizens of the community, meaning that they're thinking about, this may not just be about my workplace, but these are issues that we're facing in the community, and how do I help become a problem solver and face those questions that we're grappling with every day in our communities. So that's part of the experiential learning piece. I would love it if every student had a capstone course or study abroad. You think study abroad, again, this is a way that we could leverage technology and do perhaps a virtual way of doing study abroad so that it's really applicable to what the students are learning. And again, they can marry those concepts in real ways that will have advantages beyond just what they're learning in the classroom. I've also seen models where you combine credit and non-credit courses. As an example of this, when I was at Northern Virginia Community College, we were just starting to look at ways, working with our engineering division, particularly for those technologists going into industry, how can we work with those students that may come in on the workforce development side? Let's say they took an AutoCAD course. So how can we look at what they learned, again, assessing learning, what they learned in those courses, look at how that stacks up to what they could be learning if they were in one of our programs or one of our short-term certificates, and then find a way, an entry point for those students to move from the credit or non-credit to credit, and vice versa, just depending on the needs of the students as well as the business community and other employers. And then, as I talked about, new ways of learning. We're finding that our students, again, because of COVID, we're adjusting to make sure that they're staying connected. So we can look at options such as learning via Zoom, Panopto. I mentioned this earlier. Panopto allows for the flipped classroom to be effective. What that means is, as faculty members, you can take your lectures ahead of time, put them on Panopto, which is just a software brand, and allow students to access them. And the goal is to have them access, if you're in the flipped classroom, have them access those materials, and then you can come prepared in the classroom or in the virtual classroom, be prepared to talk about those concepts and how to apply them, and then how to help our students if they're struggling with those concepts. So there are many ways, and there are many new players into the marketplace. We're seeing not just the traditional sources, as I mentioned, when we think of higher ed, not just proprietary sources, but new business models from CourseX and edX and Coursera that are moving into the marketplace, and they're coming with their own tools to engage learners as part of the process. Then the next stakeholder group is faculty and staff. So for faculty and staff, it's important that we become more creative and innovative in our professional development plans. We know that for many of our faculty, they come prepared and they know their discipline. They know the work that they've been doing for 25 years in the business community. But what we can help them with is to become more effective teachers. And really, that's our niche as a community college, is to be effective teachers working with our students. So it behooves us to have centers for excellence in teaching and learning. It behooves us to have access to resources. Maybe we partner, because it can be expensive, but maybe we can partner with other sister institutions to be able to provide those resources so that they have access to the most effective, or those that we consider the most effective and best practice in teaching and learning. The other idea here is, and again, as a result of COVID, I think we've seen more and more of this, is for faculty to be able to work together on student learning outcomes and pedagogy. And that allows faculty to work together within disciplines and across disciplines. When we talk about staff, a lot of those same things are true. And I will say, for staff, it means that we're finding ways to keep them engaged, because a lot of our staff, they're the front line and working with our students, and we know that. So we want to make sure, again, whether it's faculty or staff, we want them to be peak performers and engaged and have job satisfaction. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that we offer those same opportunities to go to conferences. Now, I grant it is difficult in this type of environment when resources are very scarce, but we have to do that if we want to continue to grow our workforce and have people who are engaged with their positions and can help our students navigate the process. The other thing that I should tell you about professional development for faculty, I didn't mention industry exchange programs, and that allows our faculty to go out into industry and then be able to take those concepts and put them back into the classroom, and then allow those leaders to be able to come in and serve as speakers and mentors and other ways to impact the curriculum. Community service. I believe it's very important for us to be good partners in our community, and that's for faculty and staff. As the Dean of Academic Administration, I took time, because we are in the community, so I wanted to make sure that we had a model, and we were modeling for others within our institution, and also that we were showing that we were good partners in the community. So I actually took a group of our staff members out to do community service, and we had selected, and we came together as a group, we decided that we wanted to help a local early childhood place, because they were having some difficulty, needed some things painted, needed help with organizational organizing closets and classrooms, and then they also needed people to be able to read to the students. And based on the talent and interests of our team, we went out and we did that for a day. And that was good professional development for us, because it helped us to understand what are the issues, what are the things that our local community is grappling with, and then how we can use our skill set to make sure that we're honing the skill set and working with those other entities to make sure that their leaders and that their teachers, in this case, had what they needed to be effective. Other stakeholder group, business and industry. There are some key things that we can do with business and industry. And for business and industry and other community stakeholders, again, they can serve as mentors, sponsors, advisory board members, employers, and help with building the curriculum. And I will say, with Training Futures, there are three distinct examples that I'm providing here. Training Futures allowed us to see that there was a community need, actually a workforce need. We had IT employers who were having a difficult time finding qualified and skilled employees in the IT field, which was a very high-paying position, role in the community. So I brought together a group to tackle this issue, brought together family services because they could help us identify those who were underemployed or unemployed, brought together another sister community college campus because we could provide the courses that would lead to certificates that were valued by our industry partners, which would lead to internships, which then if they were successful could lead, and in many cases did lead to full-time employment. So that created a win-win-win for all of our stakeholders. And as I've mentioned, I think, well, I know the role of the chancellor is to look for, to be visible, be entrepreneurial, and look for those opportunities to create win-win-win across the board. And in this particular case, it did just that. And the only way you can do that is if you're visible, you're attuned to what the needs are in the community, and then you're coming up with and helping problem solve and broker those solutions, and then bringing in the team to help operationalize this. So it's important that when we're out in the community, in order for our reputation and credibility to stay intact, we have to make sure that we deliver what we promise. Otherwise, we're in jeopardy of losing our credibility, and then it's hard to form those alliances that we need and those partnerships that we need. Two other examples, Navy Federal Credit Union. Here is an example, Navy Federal Credit Union, Fairfax County government, municipality in Northern Virginia. We found, again, working with employers for Navy Federal Credit Union, we took our courses to Navy Federal Credit Union, which allowed them, because as you know, full-time workers, they were working 40 hours a week, it was difficult for them to leave their jobs 5 o'clock and then with traffic in Northern Virginia, it was difficult for them to get to campus for a 6 o'clock class. So to address this issue, we were able to have faculty go on site at the workplace and deliver instruction there. On the other hand, for Fairfax County government, the Fairfax County government decided that they wanted their employees and our students to have an immersive college experience. So they allowed their employees, our students, to come on site on Fridays and spend the whole day for 2 years, paid them for 2 years to earn a credential. And again, they wanted to be supportive of their employees and wanted to provide career paths and social mobility for their employees. Just a few other stakeholders, and I won't go through all of these, but K-12, Secondary Career and Technical Education Career Center, which you're already doing. And I will say it's also dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, summer bridge programs, and even starting earlier than high school with career camps and Kids for College, so that we're exposing our students to the possibilities, both in education and then what they can do once they leave here. Other community colleges, there are certain programs in certain areas where it's difficult to find faculty. And one of the ways to address that is to share faculty and share resources. And we can also do this with staff as well. When you're finding that it's hard to find people to do business processes or processing transcripts, there are ways that we can do that in a way that will benefit all institutions and our students. Looking at universities, so our four-year partners, how do we work with them? Again, the same thing is true with our K-12 partners. How do we work with their faculty so that they understand when they get to us, these are the concepts that we'll be covering. Here are the student learning outcomes. Here's our curriculum. Here's our placement test. How do we help them help our students? And that goes the other way too for those students who decide to transfer. How do we partner with them to make that a seamless transition? Alumni, very critical in this process. We want to show ourselves as helping our alumni become lifelong learners and providing opportunities to retool and reskill so that way they have marketable skills. Elected officials, again, it's so important that they understand our value proposition, and the same is true with civic organizations. So as an institution, certainly we have an obligation to address academic issues, but we know in many cases that's not what will hamper our students from success. It's non-academic issues, food security, child care, transportation, and certainly the work that you're doing with the Harvest Regional Food Bank is a testament to you understand that that is in fact the case for many of our students. career exploration opportunities. I won't go through all of these either, but just other innovative programs that I've had the opportunity to work on. 2 or 3 in particular that I'll point out here. Shattering the Glass Ceiling was a program that allowed us to work with young girls and young women to expose them to careers, non-traditional careers, and ways that they could think about how do I move up the career ladder and really excel in a career. So we brought in women who talked about their career paths and what it took to excel to the highest level. Project Graduation I'm really proud of because it allowed us to work with students who had done a great job, and we wanted to celebrate their success of completing college, but for the fact that they didn't have any money, they weren't going to be able to attend graduation. So I sought partnerships and sponsorships from our deans of students from all of our campuses and others to be able to purchase the graduation regalia. And then we asked them to pay it forward and asked others if they would return their gowns or turn in their gowns so that we could do the same thing for other graduates in subsequent years. And that actually really took off, and we had students asking for that. And the last thing here is the Center for Academic Assistance. And this was a one-stop shop, and it grew out of a need. Looking at our data, we were finding that our students were having difficulty and were having to go to multiple areas to resolve academic issues. The other piece that we found from our research is that students were grappling with what we call gatekeeper courses that were preventing them from being able to get out of developmental math and English. So we allowed students to come in the center, and then we would find ways to problem solve for them. So for example, the center would be able to get them to support services if it was an early alert system, if it was to mandatory advising, if it was to help them find a concierge model, which now you can do through technology to make sure that we're staying connected and making sure that our students are successful. And then in terms of the other piece of the courses, the same thing is true. We were able to partner with our divisions to make sure that we were finding resources and technology resources in many cases is to help solve issues related to their academic performance. So what is my vision for UAHT? This is the vision that I have for UAHT, that we'll become a national model in academic excellence and student success, and a paragon of innovative excellence. That's pretty broad, but that's the hope that I have. And I believe working together, faculty, staff, students, community, elected officials, and many stakeholders, we can actually realize this vision for UAHT. I'm convinced of it. So when I look out in the audience and when I think of the vision that I have for UAHT, I think about and I can envision walking across campus in the student center, let's say. And in the student center, I can see a room full of diverse students who are sitting together and all talking together and learning from each other. I can envision, if this is where you hold graduation, and I believe it probably is on your campus, I can envision serving as chancellor and being the cheerleader as students walk across the stage, because we've been able to do this for our students. I can envision for UAHT that for the community, we are known as the place where you want to go and get your employees because they're the best in town. That's the vision, that's the hope that I have for UAHT. And then what does that look like? There are ways to do that. So that's the vision, and here are the goals. And some of these are just to encapsulate and summarize the things that we've already talked about or I've already shared with you. To increase access for underrepresented and underserved students, improve retention and completion of students, provide all students with experiential learning, help students develop technical expertise, interpersonal skills, and the ability to learn how to learn. We know from our research that many of the jobs that we perhaps are training our students for, they may not exist. So they need the ability to be able to be quick studies, to learn new skills, and then to be adaptable. And those are the kinds of skills that we can help our students learn. To produce civic-minded students and graduates, provide graduates with marketable skills to enhance their social mobility, and provide adequate resources to help students succeed, financial needs, meet their tutoring needs, and through technological tools. The other thing that I should have mentioned earlier is when we're looking at new ways of learning, we know things such as gaming and AI, virtual assistants are really critical to help our students navigate this new environment, the new frontier, if you will, in higher education. And those will be things that we'll want to put in place. Going to cost money, so again, that's where our fundraising and fundraising will come into play to make sure that we can do that. And we want to do so and maintain our affordability. We want to provide workforce training to sharpen and refine skills of employees. We want to strengthen our relationships with all of those populations that I talked about earlier. We want to offer cultural, educational, and social programming in this venue and others to the communities we serve. We definitely want to show we are good partners and can help solve problems. So that's what I want to share with you in terms of my vision for UAHT and using innovative ways to be able to make inroads and excel in academic performance and student achievement, as well as innovative excellence broadly. And just one last story for you. I heard a sitting community college president say when he was at the point of taking on community college presidency, he had a mentor who was a president, and he gave him a piece of artwork. And on the artwork, the inscription read, "You are not superfluous and you're not deficient." And he said, I didn't really understand what that meant, so he asked the president. And the president said, "That's what I think of you. That's what I see in you. That's why I think you're going to be a great president or leader of an institution." Meaning you're not superfluous, you don't think more highly of yourself than you ought to, and you're not deficient. You know your worth. You don't think you're less than anyone else. You want to do a great job. So if that means you need to roll up your sleeves and you need to work on whatever the project is, you need to unload boxes, whatever the case may be, you're willing to do that. Your sole goal is you want to make a difference in the lives of your students, your faculty, and staff, because you understand the long game. You understand what that's going to mean to the students in particular, but also to the faculty and staff with having satisfying work. And I also echo that. I want you to know if I have the opportunity to become your chancellor, that's my mantra as well. I want to do work, good work, meaningful work, significant work, so that we are meeting the needs, particularly of our students, but all of our stakeholders. And I am excited about being here, and I look forward to answering any questions about my candidacy. But the one thing that I want to leave with you is that I'm excited. I think I've been prepared throughout my career that I could help you reach the next frontier in your quest for excellence.
Dr. Holt, can you give us an example of a millage or a tax that you have assisted in getting passed at an institution or in a region that you served in your higher education experience?
Mm-hmm. I've not had direct experience with millages. However, as I may have mentioned in this group or certainly in other groups, one of the areas that I'm responsible for is government relations. And our government relations arm is responsible for making sure that we can maintain our funding, and in some cases increase our funding. And the first thing that you have to do is you have to work with your community. You have to find allies. Again, it goes back to that value proposition. What's in it for the community? Why should they support the work that we do? Why should they support, for example, this lovely facility? They need to know that we have credibility in the work that we do that's of top caliber and that we're meeting the needs of the community. Or else, there's no matter what you do, you're not going to get the millage improved. So it's important to set the stage for that very early on, to work with your community, to work with your leaders, so that they understand the value proposition. And as I said, government relations reports to me. And what we've been able to do, we've had a three-part model of what we've been able to implement. One is we want to make sure that we are shaping our policy and understanding of what we need. So we're working with local officials, local elected officials, as well as state officials to do that. Two, our strategy was to make sure that we understand relevant legislation or things that are going on in the community and how we can help solve those challenges, and then making those elected officials, making the residents and the citizens in those communities aware so they can be our spokesperson. That's the other piece of what we do, is we find others, because obviously it seems self-serving in some ways if we're the ones making the request or sharing why it's important. And then third, we also are looking for ways to, so we want to maintain our level of support. And this year we were very fortunate in that, and unexpectedly, given the environment that we've been in, we were able to maintain or actually receive funding, very rare, but one-time funding for maintenance and repair. And the last piece is we put in for funding for a piece that we're working on that will improve the lives of Missourians through Next Gen and Precision Health. But again, that's also finding out what the needs are and then asking for it. Here was the real trick, and it hasn't been, we're still in legislative session, so we're not sure, but we believe that this is going to work in our favor, but they're also going to provide additional funding and roll it into the core of our funding so that we'll have ongoing funding to support that initiative. But for the work that we had done, the work of our president and our legislative team, and having that strategy, we would have never been able to get that done. And I suggest something very similar for the, I think the question that you're asking, how can we make sure that when we do the ask that, and there's no way to make sure, so let me be clear about that, but it's more likely that when you do the ask, that people are more receptive and willing to go with you and support the ask. Thank you for the question.
Good afternoon and welcome to Hempstead County.
Good afternoon.
You touched on two questions that I wanted to get more about, talent development and intentional engagement with vulnerable or marginalized communities, but I'll ask this question about talent development and particularly having you to expound more on the Navy Federal Credit Union courses and the Fairfax County government courses in trying to develop pipeline career advancement within our industries so that those frontline workers can advance through the company instead of people having to come inside. So if you could talk more about what type of courses were discussed or developed with those two examples that you gave.
Absolutely, thank you. I will say that part of it was they actually came to us, so they saw the need, as opposed to us going out to them and asking them for, you know, you really ought to consider this, this is what we think that we can do for you. But it was after years of being at the Rotary Club or being in the community, business after hours, and we were talking about, here are the types of services that we can provide that will help you with your workforce. And then they actually came to us. Navy Federal Credit Union came to us and said, you know, this is something that we see and we would like to offer this opportunity to our employees. What is it that you can do? So then we started to question them about what is it that you need and where are you seeing gaps in the workforce. So we did a needs assessment working with them, and then we were able to pair that with, here are the courses, and more specifically, here are the programs, here are the certificate programs, depending on if a program, and working with supervisors was also key because they could tell us more about the employees and what they really needed to be successful. So in some cases, it would have been a certificate in business or leadership. We also offered a full-fledged program for those students, and they were supportive of this, for those students who wanted to go on and earn a 4-year credential, which means that then they could then move into a supervisory role. So it's just based on the needs assessment that we did, working with the senior leaders, working with the supervisors, and then getting the employees engaged and involved. And quite frankly, many of them were very happy that the organization, in this case Navy Federal Credit Union, wanted to take such an active interest in their career, and I think that helped them with retention, lessen turnover, all of those things, so the employer understood the value of what they were doing and how it would impact them long term and hopefully impact the satisfaction of employees long term. So again, we offer certificates in business and also leadership, and we offered full-fledged programs in our business program and also general education, general degree, so that those students could move on to 4-year institutions. So that was Navy Federal Credit Union. Fairfax County government had something very similar, but they were really adamant about we also want to offer an opportunity for many of our students, first generation, didn't know really about college, but wanted them to have an opportunity not only to improve their lives, but to work with many of them were parents. So wanted them to understand that they could be a role model and set an example for their children. So that was really critical that they allowed the time off. Now the challenge there was the senior leaders understood that, but working with some of the supervisors, that was the challenge. And what we learned is that was a missing piece for them that we had with Navy Federal, with the supervisors, that we did not have at Fairfax County government. So the next time we were looking for a cohort, we made sure that we had the senior leaders also encourage the supervisors, because they knew that the senior leaders supported this, and we needed the supervisors, and they needed to understand why this was important, because a person is going to be off of work for 1 day a week for a really long time. But here's what we're hoping to gain. Here's how this is going to impact the institution, and here the municipality in this case, and here's what we're hoping is that we'll get long-term employees who want to stay here and not look for other opportunities outside of this municipality. Thank you for the question. Did you have a second question too? You'll defer? Okay.
Dr. Holt, we have some questions in the live stream chat. Our college has a higher than average turnover rate. What are your plans to improve faculty recruitment, retention, and professional development?
That's a good question. Again, I would have to work with our senior leaders to figure out. What I'm hearing is that some areas it's difficult to find full-time faculty, for example, in certain areas, full-time faculty during the day. So one of the things that, and I shared with the cabinet group, one of the things that we did that may or may not work here, so I'd have to get input from a lot of people so that I can understand what the challenges are, and then strategize with what are some ways that we can look at recruitment differently than what we are now. So one of the things that we found that was challenging for us is to find faculty, and really it was our sister community colleges were having trouble with, as a general education requirement, we required our students to take 3 credit hours or one course, actually 4 credit hours of a foreign language. And for many of the rural colleges, they were having difficulty finding those foreign language faculty and instructors. So we came together and said, you know what, we have the faculty who can teach that. So why don't we partner together in those areas where you're just having a lot of difficulty recruiting and retaining faculty. You're finding that, you know, maybe some other organization, for example, if you're looking for faculty, maybe your K-12 school district is paying more than you are. So as part of my role is to look at what are the challenges, what are the problems, and then how can we address those with innovative and creative ways? How can we address those with making sure that we're paying people in an equitable fashion, and so that we are showing their value and their worth to the institution. But those are not short-term fixes by any means and short-term solutions. We have to continue to work at that, and we need to do that working collectively with the chancellors from across the system, both at 2-year and 4-year, working with President Bobbitt and working with all of you, and continuing to share what the compelling proposition is, and to share if we don't do that, how is that going to impact our region? What will be the adverse effects if we don't take that kind of stance in our community? And we certainly don't want that to happen.
Back again. To follow up on the second question related to intentional engagement with vulnerable or marginalized communities, and you mentioned the Shattering the Glass program, or glass ceiling program, and how did that effort come about, and did you engage, and what engagement did you do with community organizations?
Okay, I'm not sure I heard the first part of the question, so.
The intentional engagement with vulnerable or marginalized communities, and using Shattering the Glass Ceiling as an example, and with whom or what organizations did you identify and work with?
Good question. So what I did there, and that was primarily for high school students, it was a way for our students to see more than what they've been exposed to. Right, students, when you thought of working in working in a hospital, they thought of doctor and nurse were the 2 primary careers that they thought of, And we wanted to be very intentional about their other occupations, and there are other occupations in which those students didn't know about. So for the glass ceiling project, we started to ask around, what are those occupations? We used and talk about community engagement, we leveraged our advisory council. We had an advisory council of over 230 people. So we started to ask questions of them. Who do you know, and what kinds of careers are they, and are they willing to come and work with us? So we really did leverage that as an opportunity to work with our business advisory group. And then we also were very intentional about the students that we selected. We worked with certain groups of students. We worked with our students with disabilities. We worked with others that were vulnerable populations, and we wanted to make sure that we were exposing them to the careers. Number one, we wanted them to know that things are possible. More than what you can see, more than what you know, things are possible. And here are the opportunities. Another thing that we did, we required all of our junior students to do job shadowing, and that gets to the point of the hospital, right? You think of doctor and nurse. Well, we had a student who actually did job shadowing, a junior, and he wanted to be in radiography, I think. Well, he went, and he absolutely hated it. He's like, I didn't realize that this was what this would be like. And he had a really good person that he was shadowing, because took the time to engage and talk about, well, let's talk about what your interests are, what your abilities, what your skills, and let's get you to someone else who works in a hospital, because it's almost like a small city in terms of the careers and occupational choices that you could have. And so, but for that experience, this student was determined that he wanted to work in radiography, and then decided, this isn't something I'm interested in. This is not an area at all, and I'm convinced that he would have gone through a lot of effort, paid a lot of tuition, and then come out at the end of that and say, this isn't for me. So we have an obligation to our students to help them understand what are the options, both at entry level and more senior levels, so that gives them something to aspire to. This is what I could be. I just need to see that there are options available. And then we wanted to expose them to people who look like them. So if you have a physical disability, we were intentional to include people like that. We included women, we included other minorities, and I was glad to see on your website for nursing, you have a non-traditional student. You have a male student there. So it's important that people can see in these career options that there are fields, there are places for me, and the only way that can happen is to engage people who look like them, or think like them, or have those perspectives, and then to be intentional, and then to leverage the resources that you have in the community to help you operationalize that particular vision. And for the time that I was there, and even afterwards, they continued the job shadowing program, and for a number of years, the shadowing, the glass ceiling project. And then that one, unfortunately, as you know, depending on people, and people move in and people move out, that one did not continue, but the job shadowing program did in fact continue. The other thing, I'll stay on this one just a little bit in case I've not shared it. Other things that we are doing currently, because I serve as interim chief diversity officer for our system, and we're looking at ways and being intentional and strategic about our approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I'm proud to announce to you that this coming fall, we're putting in place onboarding modules for all of our faculty and staff. And it's more than just check the box, yes, we've done it, yes, we've done it, but we really want to hold people accountable. So we've asked all of our deans to put together their diversity plan. What does that need to look like? And again, it can be, depending on your discipline, depending on your field, there are several different ways that you can craft it, different perspectives, different viewpoints, but having some intentionality, and then holding them accountable. So holding them accountable means that we're working with the chancellor to hold the provost accountable, then to hold the deans accountable, and then to hold the faculty and search committees. That's another piece of the work that we've done. We've required implicit bias training of all of our search committees. You have to go through it. And another layer to that is we have charged with HR. We're looking at the candidate pool. Now, of course, it's self-disclosure, but based on the limited information that people will disclose in the application process, we'll ask our HR representative to look at it and say, is this based on some metrics that we're looking for this particular field or for this particular search, is this diversity? And if not, we'll go back and say, you know, I think we have some more work to do here. So being very intentional about our practices, looking at our pedagogy, Are we having diverse perspective? Is it embedded in the curriculum and our teaching and learning outcomes? And we have to do that. We owe that. We have that obligation to our students to make sure that we are preparing them for very diverse perspectives, because we know that that's what they're likely to encounter in this new global frontier. So those are just some of the things, a few of the things that we're doing in an intentional manner to move the needle when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Holt. If you'll join me in giving her a hand.
Thank you.
And again, I want to say thank you to all those that have attended today and then also that have attended in the past. We appreciate your participation in this very important selection event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.